The old pickup truck rolled to a stop at the edge of the property, its engine ticking softly as it cooled in the late afternoon sun. Sarah stepped out onto the dusty ground, her boots sending up small clouds of ochre powder that caught the golden light. Before her stretched 200 acres of Arizona high desert, a landscape of sage and mesquite, of ancient rock formations that glowed amber and rose in the fading day. She had driven for 3 days to get here, leaving behind the gray towers of Chicago, the constant noise, the life that had stopped fitting her somewhere along the way. The ranch house stood in the distance, a low adobe structure with a wide porch that seemed to embrace the land rather than impose upon it. It had belonged to her uncle Thomas, a man she'd barely known, but who had somehow seen something in her, leaving her this place in his will with only a short note. For when you need to remember how to breathe, the air here was different, thinner, cleaner, carrying the scent of juniper and creosote bush. Sarah closed her eyes and drew it deep into her lungs, feeling something tight in her chest begin to loosen for the first time in months. The silence was profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through the desert grasses and the distant call of a raven making its way across the endless sky. She walked slowly toward the house, taking in every detail. The porch posts were weathered wood, smooth as river stones from decades of wind and sand. Clay pots held dormant plants, waiting for someone to bring them back to life. The front door was painted a faded turquoise, the color of desert sky after rain. And when she turned the key, the lock opened with a satisfying click that seemed to say, "Welcome home." Inside, the house was cool and dim, the thick adobe walls keeping out the heat of day. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that fell through small windows. The furniture was simple and worn, comfortable in the way that old things become when they've been loved. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel holding a collection of smooth river rocks and pieces of petrified wood. In the corner stood an old upright piano, its keys yellowed but somehow inviting. Sarah set down her bag and walked through the rooms slowly, letting each space reveal itself to her. The kitchen had open shelves lined with mismatched pottery in earth tones. The bedroom looked out toward the mountains, their peaks still holding snow even in late spring. Everything was simple, everything was quiet, everything seemed to whisper, "You can rest now." That first night, she sat on the porch as darkness fell, watching the transformation of the desert. The colors deepened and glowed, the rocks seeming to hold the day's light, even as shadows pooled in the arroyos and draws. The temperature dropped rapidly, and she wrapped herself in a blanket she'd found on the back of the old leather sofa. Stars began to appear, first a few, then dozens, then thousands, until the sky was a river of light flowing overhead. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed the stars. In the city, they were dim suggestions behind the glow of streetlights. Here, they were brilliant and near, so many that she couldn't begin to count them. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a path, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt genuinely small in a way that was comforting rather than diminishing. She was part of something vast and old and continuing, and that was enough. Sleep came easily that night, her body sinking into the simple bed as if it had been waiting for her. Through the open window, cool air flowed in, carrying the scent of sage and the distant sound of coyotes singing to the moon. Her dreams were uncomplicated, filled with open spaces and warm light. And when she woke the next morning to birdsong and golden dawn, she felt more rested than she had in months. The days began to take on a gentle pattern, each one similar enough to be soothing, different enough to remain interesting. Sarah woke with the sun, which rose with spectacular ceremony over the distant mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink and amber. She made coffee in the old percolator she found in the kitchen, the bubbling sound becoming a morning meditation, and took her cup out to the porch to watch the day begin. The desert came alive in the early morning. Rabbits emerged from their burrows to nibble at the new growth on the creosote bushes. A roadrunner made its daily patrol along the wash, moving with that peculiar, stilted grace, pausing occasionally to investigate something in the sand. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermal currents that would build as the day warmed. She started walking the property after breakfast, learning its contours and secrets. There was an old barn, its wood silvered by sun and wind, housing nothing now but shadows and the memory of horses long gone. Beyond it, she found the remains of a corral, its posts still standing, though the rails had fallen. A windmill stood sentinel on a slight rise, its blades turning slowly, drawing water from deep underground into a stone tank where birds came to drink. Each walk revealed something new. A cluster of barrel cactus, their pleated sides glowing green against the rusty earth. The entrance to a small cave in the rocky hillside, cool and dark, its walls painted with ancient handprints in ochre and white. The fossilized imprint of a seashell in stone, reminder of the ancient sea that once covered this land millions of years ago. Sarah had brought art supplies with her, though she hadn't been sure she'd use them. She'd been a painter once, before the corporate job, before the years of doing what was practical rather than what fed her soul. But here, with the light and color and space, something in her began to wake up. She set up an easel on the porch and started with simple sketches, just trying to capture the line of the mountains, the curve of a yucca plant, the texture of weathered wood. The paintings that emerged surprised her. They were loose and free, not trying to capture every detail, but instead seeking to convey the feeling of the place, the warmth of the light, the sense of space and air, the colors that seemed to glow from within the earth itself. She worked in the morning and late afternoon, resting during the heat of midday, learning the rhythm that everything here followed. In the afternoons, she read books from her uncle's collection, an eclectic mix of desert naturalist writings, poetry, and old westerns. She learned about the plants that surrounded her, discovering that the landscape that had seemed harsh at first glance was actually abundant with life. The prickly pear produced sweet fruit. The mesquite beans were edible and nutritious. The agave had been used for everything from food to fiber to soap. People had thrived here for thousands of years, living in harmony with the land rather than against it. Evenings were her favorite time. As the sun lowered, the quality of light became magical, turning everything golden and then rose and then purple. She made simple dinners in the old kitchen, enjoying the process of cooking for herself, eating slowly at the wooden table as the day faded. Then she would return to the porch with a blanket and watch the stars emerge, never tiring of their brilliance. Some nights she could hear music drifting across the desert from somewhere far away, perhaps from the small town 10 miles down the road, or perhaps from a neighboring ranch she hadn't yet discovered. The sound was faint and intermittent, carried on the wind, but it made her feel less alone while still preserving the solitude she was learning to treasure. She slept deeply, her body adjusting to the physical work of maintaining the property, her mind settling into a quieter state than it had known in years. The constant worry that had been her companion in the city began to fade, replaced by a peaceful awareness of the present moment. Here, there was only now the sun rising, the wind blowing, the stars turning overhead. It was her second week at the ranch when Sarah saw the rider approaching across the desert. She was on the porch painting, trying to capture the way the morning light hit the red rocks, when she noticed the dust trail in the distance. As it drew closer, she could make out a figure on horseback, moving at an easy pace, in no particular hurry. The rider was an older woman, perhaps 70, sitting tall in the saddle with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime on horseback. She wore a faded denim shirt, worn jeans, and a straw hat that had seen better days. The horse was a sturdy paint splashed with brown and white, its ears forward with friendly curiosity. "Morning," the woman called out as she drew near, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Figured it was about time to come say hello. I'm Elena Martinez. My family's had the place to the north for about 100 years or so." Sarah set down her brush and walked to the edge of the porch. "Sarah Chen. I'm Thomas's niece. I inherited this place a few months ago." Elena nodded slowly, a smile creasing her weathered face. Thomas was a good man, quiet but good. He understood the desert, understood what it means to really live here rather than just occupy space. She swung down from the saddle with surprising grace. "Mind if I water my horse at your tank?" "Please, of course." Sarah walked with Elena to the windmill, watching as the horse drank deeply from the stone tank, the water rippling with reflected sky. Elena pulled off her hat and wiped her forehead, squinting at the horizon in a way that suggested she was reading something in the land that Sarah couldn't yet see. "Storm coming in a few days," Elena said. "You'll want to make sure everything's secured. Desert storms can be fierce, especially this time of year when the weather's transitioning." They talked for over an hour, sitting in the shade of the windmill platform while the horse grazed on the sparse grass nearby. Elena told her about the land, about the families who'd lived here over the generations, about the challenges and rewards of desert life. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully, and Sarah found herself leaning in, not wanting to miss anything. "Your uncle used to come out here to get away from something," Elena said. "Never asked what, wasn't my business. But over the years, I watched him heal. The desert does that, if you let it. Strips away all the unnecessary things until you remember who you actually are underneath all the noise." She invited Sarah to visit her ranch, to meet her family, to join them for dinner sometime. "No rush," she said as she mounted her horse to leave. "When you're ready for company, you'll know. The desert teaches you to listen to your own rhythms." After Elena left, Sarah stood for a long time, watching the dust settle in her wake, feeling grateful for the connection, but also for the space to choose when and how to engage. It was a different kind of neighborliness than she'd known in the city, where proximity often meant obligation. Here, there was respect for solitude, understanding that sometimes people needed space to find themselves again. The storm Elena had predicted arrived 3 days later. Sarah woke to an unusual darkness, the sun hidden behind clouds that had rolled in during the night. The wind had picked up, gusting strong enough to rattle the windows. She spent the morning securing loose items, bringing the porch furniture inside, checking that the barn door was latched. When the storm finally broke, it was spectacular. Lightning fractured the dark sky, thunder rolling across the desert like drums. Rain came in sheets, turning the dust to mud, filling the dry washes with rushing water. Sarah stood in the doorway watching, mesmerized by the raw power of it, the way the desert seemed to come alive under the deluge. The storm passed quickly, as desert storms do, leaving behind air that smelled of wet sage and ozone. As the clouds cleared, the sun broke through, creating a double rainbow that arched across the entire sky. Sarah grabbed her camera and photographed it, but knew no image could capture the feeling of standing there, drenched and exhilarated, watching that bridge of color hover over the gleaming earth. In the days after the storm, the desert transformed. Flowers appeared seemingly overnight, carpets of yellow and purple and orange spreading across the landscape. The air was fresher, the colors brighter, everything washed clean. Sarah walked farther than she ever had before, discovering new corners of the property, feeling herself growing stronger, more at home in her own skin. Sarah found the journals by accident, tucked away in a wooden chest in what had been her uncle's study. They were bound in leather, filled with his careful handwriting, documenting years of desert observations. But interspersed with notes about weather and wildlife were personal reflections, stories, and musings that gave her a window into the man she'd never really known. She began reading them in the evenings, curled up in the big leather chair by the fireplace. Even though it was spring and still warm, she'd started lighting small fires just for the comfort of them, for the way the flames danced and created a circle of warmth and light in the gathering dusk. Her uncle, she discovered, had been a geologist who'd come to the desert for work and stayed for love. Not love of a person, though there had been a woman once, but love of the land itself. He wrote about the rocks as if they were old friends, describing their layers and colors, explaining the forces that had shaped them over millions of years. The desert is a place of deep time, he'd written. Here, you can see the bones of the earth, understand your own small place in the vast sweep of history. It's humbling and freeing at once. Our worries, the things we think are so important, they're just dust on the wind compared to these ancient stones. There were sketches throughout the journals, geological diagrams, but also drawings of plants and animals, landscapes, and cloud formations. Sarah traced them with her finger, recognizing the same rock formations she'd been painting, the same mountains he'd looked at from this same porch. She felt connected to him across time, two people finding solace in the same vast space. One entry, written about 5 years ago, caught her attention. "I think Sarah might understand this place someday. She has that look in her eyes, like she's searching for something she can't name. When the time is right, maybe this will be her refuge too. We all need a place where we can shed the armor we wear in the world and remember how to just be. She had to set the journal down, tears blurring her vision. He had known. Somehow, he had known she would need this, even when she hadn't known it herself. The gift wasn't just the land, but the permission to start over, to let go of the life that wasn't working and find one that did. The journals became her nightly companion. Through them, she learned about the desert in all its seasons, what to expect, what to watch for, what to treasure. Her uncle had documented the migration patterns of birds, the blooming schedules of different cacti, the best places to watch the sunrise and sunset. It was like having a guide, a teacher, leading her deeper into understanding of this place. One evening, following a map her uncle had drawn, Sarah hiked to a spot he'd marked as the listening place. It was a shallow bowl in the rocks, perfectly positioned to catch the last light of day while providing shelter from the wind. She settled into it as the sun began its descent, understanding immediately why he'd valued this spot. The silence here was profound, not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, of the earth itself breathing. She could hear her own heartbeat, the whisper of wind through stone, the distant call of a quail settling in for the night. As the sky colored and darkened, as the stars emerged one by one, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The last resistance fell away, and she allowed herself to fully arrive, to be completely present in this moment, this place, this life. When she finally made her way back to the ranch house by starlight, she felt lighter, as if she'd set down a burden she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. The house welcomed her with its familiar shadows and shapes, and she lit the lamps with a sense of contentment that was new and precious. As spring deepened toward summer, Sarah began to think about what it would mean to really live here, not just hide from her old life, but build a new one. The ranch had once been more than just empty space. The barn suggested horses or livestock. The old corral spoke of work and purpose. There was a fenced area that might have been a garden, though now it held only sand and a few determined weeds. She started small, clearing out the old garden space. Amending the sandy soil with compost she began making from kitchen scraps and desert plant material. She drove to the small town and bought seeds, choosing plants that could handle the heat and limited water: tomatoes, peppers, squash, herbs. The man at the feed store gave her advice, seeming pleased to see someone taking on the old Thomas place. "Your uncle, he was good with the land," the old man said, bagging her seeds. "Didn't try to fight it, didn't try to make it something it wasn't. He worked with it, understood its nature. You do the same, you'll be all right." The work was physical and demanding, but Sarah found she loved it. Loved the feeling of her hands in the soil, the satisfaction of setting seedlings into the ground, the simple hope of watching things grow. She worked in the early morning and late evening, learning to respect the heat of midday, understanding why everything here moved at a different pace. She repaired the corral fencing, even though she had no immediate plans for animals. It felt good to work with her hands, to see something broken become whole again. The physical labor tired her in a good way, and she slept even more deeply than before, her muscles pleasantly sore, her mind quiet and clear. Elena came by one morning with a gift: 3 chickens in a wire carrier. "Every ranch needs chickens," she said matter-of-factly. "These are good layers, and they'll help with the bugs around your garden. Plus, they're good company. Chickens have more personality than you'd think. Sarah found this was true. She set up a coop in the barn using materials she found on the property, and the chickens settled in as if they'd always been there. She named them Agnes, Beatrice, and Clara, and discovered Elena was right about their personalities. Agnes was bossy and adventurous, always first to investigate anything new. Beatrice was gentle and content, happy to be held and petted. Clara was clever and independent, figuring out how to roost in the rafters despite Sarah's attempts to keep her in the coop at night. The eggs they produced were a revelation, with deep orange yolks and rich flavor that made store-bought eggs seem like a pale imitation. Sarah found joy in the simple ritual of collecting them each morning, still warm from the nest, perfect and whole. As her confidence grew, so did her ambitions. She started a compost system, learning to balance green and brown materials, turning it regularly, watching as garbage transformed into rich, dark soil. She built a simple rainwater collection system, barrels positioned to catch water from the roof during the summer monsoons. She cleared trails around the property, creating walking paths that followed the natural contours of the land. Each project taught her something: patience, as she waited for seeds to germinate and plants to grow; adaptability when something didn't work and she had to try another approach; resilience when a windstorm knocked down the shade structure she'd built and she had to construct it again, stronger this time. The desert was a stern but fair teacher, and she found herself becoming more capable, more confident, more at home in her own competence. One evening, surveying the garden where tiny seedlings were pushing through the soil, she realized she hadn't thought about her old life in weeks. The job she'd left, the apartment she'd given up, the relationship that had ended badly, all of it seemed to belong to someone else. She was becoming a different person, or perhaps becoming more fully herself, stripped of all the things she'd thought she'd needed to be. The heat of summer arrived gradually, each day a few degrees warmer than the last, until Sarah understood why her uncle's journals had described this season as a test. The temperature climbed past 100 and stayed there, the sun beating down with relentless intensity. The desert took on a shimmering quality, heat waves rising from the rocks, making distant mountains waver and dance. Sarah adjusted her rhythm again, working only in the very early morning and after sunset, resting through the middle of the day in the cool interior of the adobe house. She understood now why the walls were so thick, why the windows were small, why the house had been designed the way it was. Everything here was purposeful, adapted to the demands of the environment. She developed new routines for the heat, rising before dawn to water the garden, the cool of night still held in the earth, spending midday reading or painting in the dim interior, learning to move slowly to stay hydrated, to respect the power of the sun. Emerging in the evening as the temperature finally began to drop, watching the spectacular sunsets that the summer heat seemed to amplify, the sky burning in shades of orange and crimson and gold. The chickens dug dust baths in the shade of the barn, flopping on their sides and flinging sand over themselves with obvious pleasure. The rabbits disappeared during the heat of day, emerging only in twilight to feed. Even the hawks seemed to soar higher, riding cooler air currents above the baking earth. But there was beauty in the summer too, the garden tended carefully and protected with shade cloth, produced its first harvest. Tomatoes that tasted like sunshine, peppers with a sweet heat, herbs so fragrant they perfumed her hands when she touched them. The first time she made a meal entirely from things she'd grown herself. She felt a pride and satisfaction unlike anything she'd experienced in her corporate career. The monsoons arrived in July, dramatic and violent. Clouds would build through the afternoon, towering thunderheads that turned the sky dark green. Then the storms would break with spectacular fury, lightning striking the earth, thunder shaking the house, rain falling so hard it was like standing under a waterfall. The dry washes would fill in minutes, becoming raging torrents of chocolate-colored water. Sarah learned to read the sky, to know when a storm was building, to prepare. She'd secure everything, bring the chickens into the barn, then watch from the porch as the desert was transformed by water and wind and lightning. The storms never lasted long, but they left everything changed, washed clean, the air electric with ozone and possibility. After the storms, the earth would release its scent, a smell so distinctive that there was a word for it: petrichor. Sarah loved that smell, loved the way it seemed to embody renewal and cleansing. She would walk out after the rain, her boots squelching in the mud, watching as water pooled in the rocks, knowing that countless desert creatures were drinking deeply, storing up moisture for the dry days ahead. Elena invited her to a summer gathering at the Martinez Ranch, a tradition her family had maintained for generations. Sarah drove over in the evening, following Elena's directions down a dirt road that wound through the sage. The Martinez place was larger than hers, with a sprawling adobe house, several outbuildings, and corrals that held horses and cattle. The gathering was warm and welcoming. 3 generations of the Martinez family, plus neighbors from other ranches scattered across the desert. There was food and music, stories and laughter, children running wild in the twilight, while adults sat on the porch, drinking cold beer and watching the stars emerge. Sarah found herself relaxed and happy, enjoying the company, but also content to sit quietly and listen. These were people who understood the desert life, who knew its challenges and cherished its rewards. They welcomed her without prying, accepting her as one of their own simply because she'd chosen to stay, to commit to the land and what it demanded. As the evening deepened, someone brought out a guitar and songs rose into the night, old songs of the Southwest, of cowboys and cattle, of love and loss and the endless sweep of the land. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks, moved by the simple beauty of it, by the sense of belonging she hadn't known she was seeking. Driving home under the stars, she felt grateful for the day she'd decided to leave everything behind and come here. That decision had seemed frightening at the time, a leap into unknown darkness, but it had led her here, to this life, to this growing sense of peace and purpose. She was building something real, something that mattered, something that was entirely her own. As summer eased toward autumn, Sarah continued to explore the property and the surrounding desert. She found a natural spring in a hidden canyon, water seeping from rock to form a small pool surrounded by maidenhair ferns and columbine. It was a secret place, cool and green, a miracle in the midst of all that aridity. She returned to it often, sitting on the rocks, listening to the trickle of water, feeling grateful for this gift. She discovered petroglyphs on a rock face, Near the eastern boundary of the property, ancient images carved by people who'd lived here long before ranches and property lines. Spirals and handprints, bighorn sheep and human figures, the meaning lost to time, but the presence still powerful. She would sit before them as the light changed, imagining the hands that had made them. The lives lived in this same landscape, connected across centuries by place. Her painting evolved, becoming more confident, more expressive. She no longer tried to capture exact representations, but instead sought to convey feeling and light, the essence of the desert rather than its surface details. She painted the way the mountains changed color through the day, the pattern of clouds against blue sky, the texture of weathered wood and ancient stone. She set up an online gallery, hesitantly at first, unsure if anyone would be interested in her work. But the paintings sold, slowly at first, then more regularly. People responded to them. She learned from their messages because they conveyed peace, stillness, space. In a loud and crowded world, her paintings offered respite, a window into quieter places. The income from the paintings, modest but steady, gave her confidence that she could sustain this life. She wouldn't be rich, but she didn't need much. The ranch provided more than she'd expected. Eggs from the chickens, vegetables from the garden, water from the well, warmth from the sun. She was learning the old truth that needs are actually quite simple, and that having less can sometimes mean having more. Elena became a true friend, stopping by every week or two to check on her, to share advice, to simply visit. She taught Sarah practical skills, how to tend to minor livestock ailments, how to read animal tracks, how to predict weather from the behavior of clouds and wind. She also shared stories, the oral history of the desert, tales passed down through generations about this land and the people who'd loved it. My grandmother used to say, "The desert chooses people," Elena told her one afternoon as they sat in the shade of the windmill. Not everyone can live here. Some people fight it and leave. Others adapt and find it fights back less. But a few, a lucky few, they fall in love with it. Sounds like that's what happened to you. Sarah considered this, watching the heat shimmer over the distant mountains. I think I needed a place that demanded I slow down, pay attention, live deliberately. The desert doesn't let you sleepwalk through your life. No, Elena agreed, it doesn't. But if you wake up, if you really see it and listen to it and work with it, it gives you something precious, peace, purpose, a sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. They sat in comfortable silence, two women of different generations but similar spirits, both finding home in this harsh and beautiful land. That night, Sarah sat at the old piano for the first time since arriving. It was slightly out of tune, but still playable. Her fingers found the keys, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. She played simple melodies, pieces she'd learned as a child, music that had once been important to her before life got too busy, too complicated, too loud. The music filled the house, bouncing off the adobe walls, floating out through the open windows into the night. It felt like a reclamation of something lost, another piece of herself recovered and welcomed home. She played until her hands grew tired, then sat with her fingers resting on the cool ivory keys, listening to the silence that followed, feeling complete. Autumn arrived subtly in the desert, announced not by falling leaves, but by a change in the quality of light. The sun's arc across the sky shifted, the shadows grew longer, and the brutal heat of summer gradually relented. The mornings became cool enough to need a light jacket, and Sarah found herself lighting fires in the fireplace more regularly, appreciating the warmth and comfort. The garden's summer crops were finishing, but she planted cool season vegetables, lettuce, carrots, kale, things that would thrive in the milder temperatures ahead. She harvested the last of the tomatoes, making sauce that she canned in jars she'd found in the pantry, following instructions from an old cookbook. The kitchen filled with the rich smell of cooking tomatoes, basil, and garlic. And she felt connected to generations of people who'd done this same work, putting up food for the winter, preparing, sustaining. The desert itself was preparing too. The birds that had nested in spring were gathering in flocks, ready to migrate. The rabbits were growing thicker coats. Even the plants seemed to be settling in, the brittle bush taking on a silvery cast, the ocotillo dropping its leaves, everything conserving, adapting, surviving. Sarah started a new series of paintings, trying to capture the autumn light, the way it turned everything golden. These paintings had a different quality than her earlier work, more contemplative, more mature. She could see her own growth reflected in them, the way her understanding of color and light had deepened through months of close observation. She also began writing, keeping her own journal to complement her uncle's. At first, she just recorded practical details, what she'd planted, what repairs she'd made, weather observations. But gradually, the writing became more personal, a way of processing her transformation, documenting this journey from who she'd been to who she was becoming. 6 months ago, I was a different person, she wrote one evening. I was lost and didn't even know it, trapped in a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt hollow inside. Coming here felt like giving up, like failure. Now I understand it was the opposite. It was finally having the courage to choose myself, to build a life aligned with my actual values, rather than someone else's definition of success. Elena invited her to help with the fall cattle work, and Sarah spent a weekend at the Martinez Ranch, learning skills she'd never imagined needing: how to sit a horse properly, how to move cattle without stressing them, how to read the land for good grazing. The work was hard but satisfying, and she came home tired and sore, but also exhilarated, part of something real and meaningful. She began to think about getting a horse of her own. The ranch had a barn and corral, and she had the space. The idea of riding out across the desert, of covering ground that would take hours to walk, of seeing the land from horseback the way it had been seen for centuries, appealed to her deeply. Elena helped her find the right animal, a 12-year-old quarter horse, gelding named Copper, steady and kind, perfect for a rider still learning. The day Copper arrived, stepping down from the trailer and looking around with calm interest at his new home, Sarah felt a shift. This was commitment. This was putting down roots. This was choosing to stay. She spent hours with Copper, learning his personality, earning his trust. She brushed him until his coat gleamed, fed him by hand, talked to him as she worked around the barn. Gradually, they became partners. She started riding, first just around the property, then farther out into the desert, always with Elena's coaching and advice echoing in her mind. The view from horseback was different, higher and wider, and she saw things she'd missed on foot. The way the land rolled and dipped. The patterns of vegetation that revealed underground water. The trails that animals had followed for years. Smooth paths through the scrub that made travel easier. Riding copper, she felt connected to the long history of this place, to all the people who'd traveled this same ground on horseback, reading the same signs, following the same paths. Winter in the high desert was nothing like winter in Chicago. There was no deep snow, no weeks of gray clouds, no bitter winds that cut through every layer. Instead, winter here was a gentle season, cool and clear, with temperatures that made outdoor work pleasant instead of punishing. The light in winter was Sarah's favorite, low and golden, painting everything with warmth even when the air was cold. The shadows were long and dramatic, perfect for painting. She set up her easel outside on all but the coldest days, working quickly to capture the way the light changed, the way it revealed texture and depth. She celebrated her first Christmas at the ranch quietly, alone, but not lonely. She cut juniper branches and brought them inside, their resinous scent filling the house. She made a simple meal and played carols on the piano, singing along with a joy she hadn't felt during holidays in years. In the evening, she sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars, feeling grateful for everything this year had brought. Elena's family invited her for New Year's, and Sarah spent the evening surrounded by warmth and laughter, counting down to midnight with people who'd become her community. When she drove home in the early hours of the new year, the desert was silver with starlight, and she felt full of hope and possibility. The new year brought new projects. She started planning a larger garden, wanting to grow more of her own food, to become more self-sufficient. She sketched out designs, ordered seeds, planned crop rotations. She repaired more fencing, thinking about maybe getting a few goats or a sheep, animals that could thrive in this environment. She also started teaching art classes in the small town, once a week in the community center. It brought in extra income, but more than that, it connected her more deeply to the community. Her students were mostly retirees and ranchers' wives, people who'd lived here all their lives, but who'd never taken time to really look at the landscape, to see it through an artist's eyes. She loved watching them discover the beauty that surrounded them, loved facilitating that shift in perception. Winter was also a time for rest, for consolidation. The frantic growth of spring and summer had passed. The intense heat that demanded constant attention to water and shade was gone. Instead, there was time to read and think, to plan and dream, to simply be present without always doing. Sarah read through all of her uncle's journals again, this time with the understanding that came from having lived here, from having experienced what he described. The passages that had seemed abstract before now made perfect sense. She could picture the exact spot he meant when he described watching the sunrise from the rim rocks. She'd seen the same owl he'd sketched hunting at twilight. She also read widely in desert literature, immersing herself in the writings of naturalists and ranchers, poets and scientists who'd tried to capture what this place meant. She found kinship with these writers, people across different eras, united by love of arid lands, by understanding that what seemed empty was actually full, that what looked harsh was actually generous in its own way. On cold nights, she practiced piano, her fingers growing more nimble, muscle memory returning from childhood lessons. She played for herself, for the pleasure of creating something beautiful, for the way music filled the space and made the house feel alive. Sometimes the chickens would gather outside the window, seeming to listen, their heads cocked to one side in that curious way chickens had. Spring came again, and with it a sense of completion, of having traveled full circle. Sarah had been at the ranch for a year, had experienced all the seasons, had learned the rhythm and pattern of this place. The woman who'd arrived in the spring before, running from a life that didn't fit, seemed like a stranger now. She celebrated the anniversary quietly, riding Copper out to the listening place her uncle had loved. She sat in the shallow bowl of rock as the sun set, watching the colors change, feeling the peace that had become her constant companion. She thought about the year, about everything she'd learned and discovered, about the person she'd become. "Thank you," she said out loud, speaking to her uncle, to the land, to whatever force had guided her here. "Thank you for this gift." The garden was thriving again, planted with summer crops that were already pushing through the soil. The chickens were laying prolifically, and she'd added 2 more to the flock. Copper was sleek and healthy, a true partner now. The house felt like home, filled with her paintings and books, her music and memories, evidence of a life being well lived. She'd made the decision to stay permanently, to let go of any lingering thoughts about returning to her old life. She'd sold her storage unit in Chicago, the last tangible connection to her former existence. She didn't need any of those things. Everything she needed was here. Her art was selling well enough to provide a steady income, supplemented by the teaching and occasional ranch work she did for Elena and other neighbors. She wasn't wealthy, but she had enough, and she'd learned that enough was a kind of wealth that had nothing to do with money. She'd also started a new project, a series of paintings exploring the idea of home, of place, of belonging. They were her most personal work yet, each one a meditation on what it meant to find where you fit in the world. The paintings were abstract, but also deeply rooted in the specific landscape around her, trying to convey not what the desert looked like, but what it felt like, how it transformed the people who opened themselves to it. Elena came by one afternoon in early summer, and they sat on the porch, drinking iced tea, watching the heat shimmer over the land. "You look happy," Elena observed. "Really happy, not just pretending." Sarah smiled. "I am. I didn't know I could feel like this, so settled, so at peace with who I am and how I'm living." "The desert does that," Elena said, "if you let it. Most people can't. They need more stimulation, more people, more noise. But some of us, we need this, the space, the quiet, the chance to hear ourselves think, to figure out who we really are underneath all the expectations." They sat in comfortable silence, the friendship between them solid and easy, built on shared understanding and mutual respect. Sarah thought about how lucky she was to have found Elena, to have this wise and kind presence in her life. As evening approached and Elena prepared to leave, she turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "You know, your uncle would be proud of you, of what you've done with this place, but more than that, of who you've become. That's what he really wanted for you, I think. Not just to have the ranch, but to find yourself here." After Elena left, Sarah walked the property as the sun set, a walk she'd done hundreds of times now, but which still felt fresh and new. The land revealed itself differently every day, every season, every year. She would never finish learning it, and that was part of its gift. She stopped at the garden, checking the plants, pulling a few weeds, straightening the shade cloth. The tomatoes were flowering, the peppers were setting fruit, the herbs were lush and fragrant. She'd grown this with her own hands, from seed and soil and water and attention. It was real in a way that nothing in her corporate career had ever been. She visited the chickens, who rushed to greet her with their funny bobbing walk, hoping for treats. She scattered scratched grain and checked their water, laughing at their antics, at Agnes's bossy determination to be first, at Beatrice's gentle contentment, at Clara's clever independence. She groomed Copper in the barn, brushing away the dust from his day, checking his hooves, making sure he had hay and water for the night. He nuzzled her shoulder, waffling softly, and she rested her forehead against his warm neck, breathing in the good smell of horse and hay and leather. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Sarah returned to the house, lighting lamps, starting a small fire even though it wasn't really cold enough to need one. She made a simple dinner and ate slowly, savoring each bite, grateful for the food and the solitude and the peace. Later, she sat at the piano and played, her fingers moving over the keys with confidence now, creating melodies that rose into the night. The music expressed what words couldn't, the journey she'd taken, the transformation she'd undergone, the gratitude she felt for this unexpected life. When she finally climbed into bed, she lay for a while looking out the window at the stars, listening to the coyotes singing in the distance, feeling the cool desert air on her face. She thought about the year behind her and the years ahead, about the paintings she would create and the gardens she would plant, about the seasons that would come and go, each one teaching her something new. As summer deepened and the heat grew intense again, Sarah found herself thinking about time differently, not the measured, scheduled time of her old life, where every hour was accounted for, every day packed with obligations. Here, time was slower, deeper, measured in seasons and growth cycles, in the patient accumulation of small changes that added up to transformation. She'd been reading about the geology of the region, studying her uncle's notes and diagrams, beginning to understand the vast timescales written in the rocks around her. The mountains she looked at every day had been formed hundreds of millions of years ago. The fossils she found were remnants of creatures that had lived in ancient seas. Even the soil beneath her feet had taken millennia to form, grain by grain, weathering slowly from stone. This perspective was both humbling and comforting. Her own life, her worries and dreams and daily concerns were just a blink in the desert's long history. But that didn't make them meaningless. If anything, it made them more precious, made each moment more worth savoring. She was part of something ancient and continuing, her time here just one thread in an endless tapestry. She started taking longer rides on Copper, exploring farther from the ranch, discovering new canyons and mesas, springs and stone formations. Each ride revealed something unexpected, a grove of ancient juniper trees, their trunks twisted and gnarled, a hidden valley where wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion, a viewpoint where she could see for 50 miles in every direction, nothing but desert and mountain and sky. On one of these rides, she discovered another ranch, abandoned and slowly returning to the desert. The buildings were falling down, the corral fences collapsed, the garden plot marked only by slightly different vegetation. It was melancholy, but also somehow peaceful, seeing how quickly the desert reclaimed what humans had briefly borrowed. She thought about her own place in this landscape, about the impermanence of human structures and projects. The ranch would outlast her, but eventually it too would return to the desert. That didn't make the work of maintaining it meaningless. If anything, it made it more meaningful. She was a caretaker for a time, keeping this place alive and productive before passing it on to whoever came next. She began making plans for the future, thinking about how to ensure the ranch would continue after she was gone. She wanted to protect it from development, keep it as working land or as habitat. She started researching conservation easements, talking to Elena about how such things were done, thinking about legacy in a way she never had before. Her art continued to evolve, the paintings becoming more accomplished, more distinctive. She was developing a reputation, small but growing, as an artist who captured something essential about the desert, something that resonated with people whether they'd ever seen such landscapes or not. The universal in the specific, one reviewer had written, and Sarah had felt a glow of pride at being understood. She started mentoring a younger artist who'd moved to the area, a woman in her 30s who was trying to make a similar transition from corporate life to creative work. Sarah found she enjoyed sharing what she'd learned, helping someone else navigate the challenges and doubts she'd faced. It was a way of giving back, of passing on the gift she'd been given. The monsoons came again, and again Sarah marveled at their power and beauty, the way they transformed everything in minutes. She'd learned to work with them now, directing the runoff into her garden, capturing water for later use, letting the desert teach her about adaptation and efficiency. One afternoon, standing in the garden after a rain, watching water droplets catch the light on leaves and stems, Sarah realized she hadn't thought about her old job, her old apartment, her old life in months. It had receded completely, becoming something that had happened to someone else. She was fully present in this life now, fully committed, fully herself. She thought about the woman who'd arrived here frightened and exhausted, running from failure and disappointment. That woman had needed the desert to strip away all the unnecessary things, to reduce her to essentials, so she could rebuild from a solid foundation. The desert had been harsh but fair, demanding but generous, and she had risen to meet its challenges. Now she was someone different, stronger, calmer, more confident in her own judgment. She knew how to read weather and tend animals. She could fix fences and grow food and create art that moved people. She had friends who understood her and a community that accepted her. She had work that mattered and days that felt meaningful. She had found home. On a day much like the one when she'd first arrived, Sarah stood on the porch watching the sun set over the desert. 18 months had passed since that first evening, since she'd stood in this same spot, uncertain and afraid, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The landscape before her was unchanged in its essentials, the same rocks and plants, the same mountains etched against the sky. But she saw it differently now, with deeper understanding, with appreciation for its subtleties and complexities. What had seemed empty was full of life. What had seemed harsh was actually perfectly balanced. What had seemed alien was now the most familiar place in the world. The chickens were settling into their coop for the night, their soft clucking barely audible over the evening breeze. Copper was grazing in the corral, his coat gleaming copper gold in the last light. The garden was producing abundantly, staked tomatoes, heavy with fruit, squash vines spreading across the ground. Everything was thriving because she'd learned to work with the land instead of against it. In the house behind her, paintings leaned against the walls, waiting to be shipped to galleries in Santa Fe and Tucson. Her journals filled a shelf now, documenting her days and observations, creating a record for whoever might come after. The piano stood in the corner, its keys worn smooth from regular playing. Every object, every surface held memory and meaning, evidence of a life being lived with intention and care. Sarah thought about what she would tell her younger self, the woman who'd been so afraid to leave the familiar, even though the familiar was making her miserable. She would say, "Trust the leap. Trust that there's something better waiting, even if you can't see it yet. Trust that you have the strength to build a new life from scratch. Trust the desert and what it can teach you about resilience and adaptation and finding beauty in unexpected places." She would say, "You will be lonely sometimes, but loneliness is different from being alone, and you will learn to love solitude. You will work harder physically than you ever have, but it will be satisfying work that produces tangible results. You will have less in terms of possessions and conveniences, but you will have more in terms of time and space and freedom to create. You will be yourself, finally, fully, without apology or compromise." As the colors deepened and the first stars appeared, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her for her uncle's unexpected gift, for Elena's friendship and guidance, for the community that had welcomed her, for the land itself, patient teacher and generous provider, for the courage she'd found to leave everything behind and start over, for every challenge that had made her stronger, and every beauty that had fed her soul. The desert had given her what she needed most: space to breathe, time to heal, and distance enough from her old life to see it clearly and choose something different. It had stripped away everything unnecessary until only the essential remained. In doing so, it had given her back to herself. The stars were emerging now, hundreds and then thousands, the Milky Way appearing like a river of light flowing overhead. Sarah wrapped herself in a blanket and settled into the chair on the porch, content to watch the darkness deepen and the stars multiply. In no hurry to go inside, wanting to savor this moment of perfect peace. The coyotes began their evening song, voices rising and falling in complex harmony. An owl called from somewhere near the barn, its low hooting steady and calm. The wind whispered through the sage, bringing the scent of desert plants and distant rain. All of it combined into a symphony that spoke of home, of belonging, of having finally found the place where she was meant to be. Sarah closed her eyes and breathed it all in, feeling her body relax completely, her mind quiet and clear. There was nothing to fix, nothing to worry about, nothing to prove. There was only this, the cool air on her skin, the stars wheeling overhead, the solid earth beneath her, the peaceful certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. Tomorrow there would be work to do, paintings to create, a garden to tend, animals to care for. There would be seasons changing, weather to prepare for, the endless small tasks that made up a life lived close to the land. But tonight, there was just this moment, this peace, this profound sense of having come home to herself at last. As sleep began to pull at her, Sarah opened her eyes one last time to look at the stars, brilliant and near in the clear desert air. She thought about all the people across time who'd looked up at these same stars from this same piece of earth, finding the same comfort and wonder she felt now. She was part of that long continuity, connected across time and space by place, and by love of this strange and beautiful land. With a contented sigh, she rose and went inside, the house welcoming her with its familiar shadows and warmth. She moved through the evening routine without thinking, carried by habit and peace. When she finally lay down in bed, the window opened to the night. She felt herself drifting easily into sleep. Her last waking thought, a simple one: I am home. And outside, the desert night continued in its ancient rhythms, the stars turning slowly overhead, the wind moving through the sage, everything exactly as it should be, exactly as it had always been, patient and enduring and full of quiet grace. The darkness wrapped around the ranch house like a soft blanket, warm and protective. Inside, Sarah drifted deeper into sleep, her breathing slow and even, her body completely relaxed into the comfortable mattress that had molded itself to her shape over the months she'd been here. Her dreams were gentle, filled with the imagery of her waking life, but softened, transformed. She dreamed of walking through the desert at dawn, the light just beginning to touch the tops of the mountains, painting them gold while the valleys still held shadow. In the dream, she moved without effort, floating almost, her feet barely touching the ground. The sage released its perfume as she passed, and she could smell it even in sleep, the scent mingling with reality as a real breeze carried the fragrance through her open window. In the dream, she came upon a garden more abundant than any she'd grown in waking life, plants heavy with fruit and flowers, everything thriving in impossible profusion. She picked tomatoes that were warm from the sun, their skin tight and perfect, and the taste in the dream was somehow more real than reality, an essence of tomato that contained summer and earth and growth all at once. The chickens appeared, but in the dream they were iridescent, their feathers catching light like opals, and they followed her like loyal dogs, their soft clucking a kind of song. Copper was there too, but when she mounted him, they didn't ride across the familiar terrain. Instead, they rose into the air, soaring over the desert, like the hawks she watched from her porch. She could see the whole landscape spread below, the patterns invisible from ground level becoming clear. The ancient riverbeds that cut through the land, the way the vegetation followed water even when there was no surface flow, the paths that animals had worn over centuries of use. In her dream flight, she saw her ranch from above, the house and barn looking small and tidy, the garden a green jewel in the tawny landscape, everything in its right place. She saw Elena's ranch in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney even though it was summer. She saw the town, its few streets and buildings looking like toys from this height. And then she was flying higher still, seeing how the desert stretched in all directions, vast and ancient and beautiful. The mountains rose like islands in a sea of sand and sage. The canyons cut deep into the earth, revealing layers of time written in stone. Everything was connected, everything part of one great whole, and she was part of it too, a small but necessary piece of the pattern. The dream shifted, became more abstract. She was painting, but the canvas was enormous, the size of a wall, and the colors she used were impossible shades that didn't exist in waking life, but made perfect sense in the dream. Blues deeper than midnight, oranges brighter than flame, purples that held both shadow and light. Her brush moved across the canvas with confidence, creating something she couldn't quite see, but knew was exactly right. Then she was playing piano, but the music came from the earth itself, from the rocks and plants and animals, and she was just channeling it, giving it form. The notes rose and fell like the land, like the seasons, like the cycle of day and night. Elena was there, and her Uncle Thomas, who she'd never met in life, but who appeared in the dream as a kind presence, nodding approval. "You understand now," he said, his voice warm. "It's not about owning the land or even living on it. It's about being part of it, letting it teach you who you really are." In the dream, Sarah nodded, though she didn't speak. Words seemed unnecessary. Understanding passed between them without language, the way understanding sometimes does in dreams, immediate and complete. The scene shifted again, more gently now, and she was back at the ranch, sitting on the porch in the evening light. But this time, she wasn't alone. People were there, gathered around her, though she couldn't quite see their faces. They felt like family, like belonging, like the community she'd found here. There was laughter and music, food and warmth, connection without pressure or expectation. A child ran past, chasing one of the chickens, and Sarah felt a pang of something, not quite longing, but recognition. The future, perhaps, or possibility. The dream didn't explain, just presented the image and let her feel whatever she felt about it. Then the gathering faded, and she was alone again on the porch. But it was a comfortable alone, chosen and cherished. The stars were coming out, just as they did every night, and she was watching them with perfect contentment, knowing she could sit here as long as she wanted. That time had no power over this moment. The dream became less visual now, more feeling. A sense of deep peace settled over her, warm and complete. She felt held by something larger than herself, supported, accepted exactly as she was. There was no striving, no needing to be different or better or more. There was just being, just existing, just breathing in and out in rhythm with the earth itself. She felt her body in the bed, comfortable and relaxed, but also felt herself expanding beyond it, consciousness drifting and spreading like smoke, becoming part of the night, part of the desert, part of the vast and peaceful darkness. It wasn't frightening, but freeing, this sense of dissolution into something larger, this recognition that boundaries were more permeable than they seemed. The dream held her there in that space between self and not self, that liminal place where consciousness softened and spread and became part of everything. Time passed, or didn't pass, it was impossible to say. There was just the gentle darkness and the sense of floating, of being carried, of letting go completely and trusting the letting go. Gradually, even the awareness of dreaming faded. Sarah sank into deeper sleep, beyond dreams and images, into pure rest. Her breathing slowed even more, her heartbeat steady and calm. The night wrapped around her, the house held her, the desert embraced her. Everything was still and quiet and perfectly at peace. Outside, the stars continued their slow wheel across the sky. The moon rose, painting the desert silver. Small creatures emerged to hunt and forage, living their ancient patterns. The wind died down to nothing, and the silence became profound, complete. The kind of silence that exists nowhere else but the deep desert night, far from cities and roads and human noise. The hours passed in that timeless way. They do in the middle of the night, when one moment seems to last forever, and yet the whole stretch from midnight to dawn can pass in what feels like an instant. Sarah slept through it all, her rest deep and healing, her body recovering from the day's work, her mind processing and integrating all she'd learned and experienced. In the darkest hour before dawn, when the night is at its deepest and stillest, something in the quality of the darkness began to change. It was imperceptible at first, but gradually the black became not quite as absolute. The stars, which had seemed so bright, began to fade just slightly. The eastern horizon, where it met the distant mountains, took on the faintest suggestion of light. Sarah stirred slightly in her sleep, some deep part of her awareness registering the approaching day, even though she didn't wake. Her body shifted, seeking a more comfortable position, and then settled again, claiming these last precious minutes of rest before morning would call her back to the waking world. The dawn came slowly, patiently, as it always did in the desert. The sky lightened degree by degree, the darkness gradually giving way to deep blue, then lighter blue, then the first hints of pink and gold where the sun would soon appear. The birds began to wake, their first tentative songs puncturing the silence, calling to each other across the awakening land. Inside the house, Sarah began to drift up from the depths of sleep, not yet awake, but no longer fully asleep either. She became aware of her body again, of the comfortable bed, of the cool air on her face from the open window. The dreams had faded, leaving only a residue of peace and well-being, a sense that she'd traveled somewhere good and returned safely. The light grew stronger, finding its way through the window, touching the walls with gentle fingers. Sarah's breathing changed, quickening slightly as consciousness began to return. Her eyes moved beneath their lids, seeing the light even before she opened them. She hovered in that delicious space between sleeping and waking, not quite ready to let go of the night, but beginning to feel the pull of the new day. Finally, as the sun broke free of the mountains and sent its first rays across the desert, Sarah opened her eyes. The room was washed in golden morning light, everything familiar and welcoming. She lay still for a moment, enjoying the warmth of the bed, the peace of the morning, the knowledge that another beautiful day was beginning. She could hear the chickens starting to stir in their coop, making soft questioning sounds, wondering if it was time for breakfast yet. She could hear Copper moving in the corral, probably hoping for his morning hay. The house itself seemed to wake around her, the adobe walls making tiny sounds as they adjusted to the changing temperature. The old wood settling, everything alive in its quiet way. Sarah stretched, feeling her muscles pleasantly tired from yesterday's work, but good, strong, capable. She smiled, thinking about the day ahead, about the painting she wanted to work on, about the garden that needed tending, about all the small tasks and pleasures that made up her life here. But there was no rush. Not yet. She could lie here a few more minutes, enjoying the morning light, feeling grateful for another day in this place she'd come to love so deeply. She closed her eyes again, not to sleep, but to simply be present, to notice her breathing, to feel the peace that seemed to radiate from the earth itself. This was the gift the desert had given her, this ability to be present, to rest completely, to wake with gratitude rather than dread. This knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. This deep, bone-level certainty that she had finally found home. The morning called to her gently, and Sarah answered it with equal gentleness, rising slowly from the bed, standing at the window to look out at the desert awakening in the new light. Everything was bathed in gold. Everything was fresh and new, and yet also ancient and eternal. The same sun rising over the same land it had risen over for millions of years. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cool morning air, and felt ready to begin again, to step into another day of this life she'd built. One small choice at a time, one day at a time, until it had become something beautiful and sustaining and true. And so the night released her gently into morning, and the cycle continued as it always had and always would. The earth turning, the sun rising, the desert holding all of it in its ancient, patient embrace, teaching anyone who would listen the lessons of resilience and adaptation, of finding beauty in unexpected places, of coming home to yourself at last.